Well, the Ducks didn't pick anyone or really not a whole lot in free agency. And trades, not much going on there either. So, what's next? We'll talk about all of that on this edition of Locked On Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
You're Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That's right. Welcome to Locked On Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, or TLOPN. I'm your host, Jason J.D. Hernandez. I've been covering hockey for well over a decade. Also have contributed to Defend the Nest, which covers the San Diego Gulls. And I'm also the PA announcer for the Coachella Valley Firebirds. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. The sports stop sporting like we want them to. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. Something for everyone, every day, all summer long. Visit FANDUEL.COM right now to get started. Well, free agency has pretty much come and gone. It has been about a week. And as much as I wanted to record this right away, part of me wanted to wait, like the Ducks. The Ducks have waited. And also there was all kinds of content from the draft and just all kinds of a mess. But you know what? They still didn't do much. I mean, there were signings that took place last couple of days after the rookie camp or the development camp, which I talked about. But aside from that, it's been a big bowl of, just scraps. It's table scraps at this point. All right. So we're going to get into it right now and just talk. Let's rip the Band-Aid off. Talk about it. They missed out on the big fish, the big free agent fish. And why am I saying fish? Because there's a certain team that a couple of big fish landed to, and they have catfish thrown on the ice. I'm talking about the Nashville Predators. Why am I talking about the Nashville Predators? Because there were two big signings that Anaheim took a punt on. Like they tried to get those couple of guys, and it didn't happen. And by the way, hat tip to Eric Stevens for giving a little more insight on this. So Jonathan Marchessault, who I've called the Corsi King, he signed a big deal with the Nashville Predators. Now, he is a little bit older, but he can still play. He can still motor. He is still part of the heart and soul of the Vegas Golden Knights. And honestly, Vegas got a lot worse giving up a player like Jonathan Marchessault. He is making a big contract. 5 years, $27.5 million. He's in his 30s. He's not young. That being said, I still think that contract might age okay because he's getting $5.5 million per season for the next 5 years. It's going to age very well the next 3 or 4 years. That fifth, maybe not. But honestly, I could see that being a much better than a much worse contract for the Nashville Predators, because Marchessault is the kind of player that can find everyone else easily, and he still has it on both sides of the ice. He still looked really good last season in Vegas. Obviously looked fantastic a couple of years ago when they won the Stanley Cup. So that contract, I actually got to give a lot of credit to Nashville too. But you know what? Reports from Eric Stevens from The Athletic, he put out an article saying that the Ducks did make big offers to both of those guys, but they both signed for Nashville. Steven Stamkos is the other player. He got 4 years, $32 million. That contract, I don't think, is going to age as well as Jonathan Marchessault, because Marchessault, 5.5. Stamkos, $8 million per season. Stammer is going to get a lot of money the next 4 years. Granted, he is 33, 34, but he's still scoring 30, 40 goals a season. That one, I think, is going to age well for the first year, maybe the first 2 years, and that is it. I think Nashville, they are going for it right now. They are going to try to win it all in the next year or two. I get that. But still, for the Ducks to miss out on that, The questions now lie: how much did the Ducks offer? How much term did they offer? They still have enough flexibility. They still have enough cap space that they could have landed one of those two guys. They could have landed both theoretically, but they would have been, I guess, risking the future or risking not re-signing guys in the future. So there is that risk. But $13.5 million over the next 4 seasons, when you've got 30 million plus on the table right there, yeah, the Ducks could have made these moves. So then the further question becomes, did Nashville match it? And if so, what did that conversation look like? Or did they go further? I would assume that Nashville, all they had to do was match it, because Stamkos is older, Marchessault is older. They're both in stages of their careers where they want to win. They do not want to be part of a rebuild that they might never see. And I understand that. They want to win right now. And Nashville's got a solid team, to be honest. They've got a good lineup, some fairly friendly contracts on their end. So I could see why they would go to the Predators instead of the Ducks. But did they? I mean, they went for it. They've got their contracts. They've got their roster. They've got very little cap space right now, but their team, they got Marchessault, Stamkos, O'Reilly, Tommy Novak, Colton Sissons. They got Nyquist. They got Forsberg, who was still very good. Cody Glass. Luke Evangelista is going to become a very good player. And then you have Roman Josi, who's still on the team. Brady Shea, who's a long-timer on this team. And then you have Alex Carrier, Luke Shen. They're solid. And, of course, you have UC Saros in net. The Predators are going for it now. They're going to be a force in the Central Division in the next couple of seasons. They're going to be right there neck and neck with Dallas and Colorado. In fact, those are my 3 teams in that division: Colorado, Dallas, Nashville. Everyone else, I mean, yes, I know I didn't mention Winnipeg. I know that. But that Central Division is going to be so strong. It is going to be scary. I predict that both wild cards are going to come out of that division next season. And for a team like Anaheim, that doesn't leave a whole lot. So I get why players of that caliber would not want to go to Anaheim. I get it. Is this good for Anaheim, though? In the long run, yes. I mean, let's be honest. Let's be really, really honest. This free agent pool hasn't been as strong as years past. The pool of free agents this season it's been decent, but the couple of those big guns that you wanted both went to Nashville. That says something about the kind of team that they're building. And I will give credit to Verbeek for actually trying to land him, but the fact that he came up empty-handed in day 1 of free agency, that's a little bit telling. I think that's more telling about the team right now than Pat Verbeek, because Verbeek at least tried. Although it doesn't look good when he says the day before free agency that he is going after a top 6 forward and a top 4 defenseman. When you say that in front of thousands of fans, or 1,000 plus fans at Honda Center on the Flock Party, it reflects bad on you when you don't pull through on that. It does. But I'm still giving some benefit of the doubt, because as we heard from Eric Stevens, he did try. He did try to get those guys here. And I'm sure it wasn't just those 2 guys. I'm sure he was on the phones all day trying to get free agent and seeing each player go to a different team, go to a different team, go to a different team. It must have hurt. But you know what? Patience. I know I've said this every year since I've been here. Patience, I've been saying that for the last few years. How much patience, or how much more patience, do you all have? The best that the Ducks have done the last few years was that run in 2021-22, where they got off to a hot start. They were still very good halfway through the season. That's the best the Ducks have done in the last 6 years. So how much more patience do you guys have? Do you have another year's worth of patience? Because that's practically what we're staring down the barrel towards. Another year of patience, another year of rebuilding. But after this, we'll see what happens. All right, we're going to head into the first intermission. I'm going to talk about who actually did sign with Anaheim. We'll get to all of that on the other side. And now, a brief word from FanDuel. And folks, it is the dog days of summer. It's obviously the dog days of summer. And with FanDuel, you can make every moment more. And, we have fewer games in general. And there's not as many sports going on right now. But you know what? FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. With baseball still happening, I mean, it's not quite dead to me right now. All I have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long through the dog days of summer. So head over to FANDUEL.COM and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball and the official sports betting partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. And please, folks, gamble responsibly. Welcome back to Locked On Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Once again, you are locked in with Jason JD Hernandez. Let's talk about who actually did sign with the Ducks. I mean, they didn't leave completely empty-handed. They at least got some guys to round out their roster, so to speak. So not all hope is lost. Okay, look, I'm trying to stay positive here. I am trying to stay as optimistic as possible. And this is me directly talking to you, the Ducks fans. I get it. I'm entering my sixth full season. Wow. Sixth full season of hosting Locked On Anaheim Ducks. The past 5 full seasons, past 6 seasons really, the Ducks have not made the playoffs. They've gone practically nowhere. And I get it. I do. Okay. I'm done waxing poetic here. Let's talk about new members of the Ducks. And I'm going to start with actual signings first because I think I want to go with that. The last signing they did have was, well, they had a couple of ELCs. They had Becca Seneca and Stan Solberg. Those were signings. And then you had some re-signings. You had Isaac Lundestrom, who was the RFA that got re-signed. Even though they were unrestricted free agents, there was a couple of important re-signings. Earl Vakanainen and Brett Leason is back. Whew. I liked Leason's game last year. I think he was one of the unsung heroes of the bottom 6 for the Ducks last season. And you always need that steady presence in the bottom 6. And Brett Leason provides that. So got to give props to the Ducks for getting Vax back and for getting Leason back. Now, there was a couple of other moves that they did make. One in particular that I'm a little bit curious about. Jansen Harkins. Jansen Harkins is a bottom 6 guy. He did spend last season with the Pittsburgh Penguins. He was there. He was a guy. He was a bottom 6 guy and didn't contribute a whole lot in 45 games. Only 4 points. For a forward, yeah, I mean, that's something. I mean, only having 4 points in 45 games. Yeah. I think Pens fans were wanting more out of him. The previous 4 seasons with Winnipeg, he did about as expected or about that pace. Yeah. In 154 games, he got 27 points, 13 goals. Okay, so at least he kind of scored some goals. And he was another guy with Winnipeg, someone else that was there for most of the season. I've used this term more often than not. I think of him as a tweener. Now, when I say tweener, I mean someone that'll bounce between the NHL and the AHL. Someone who is probably going to be a 4th-line guy in the National Hockey League, or someone that is going to be top line or top 6 in the American Hockey League. So that's what I mean when I say a tweener. And I think he is definitely a tweener kind of guy for most teams. For Anaheim, who is kind of light on the roster, he might wind up spending most of the season in Anaheim. That's where I see Jansen Harkins ending up. They also got Carson Meyer in free agency. I thought that was an interesting signing as well. I think that's going to wind up being a minor league deal. Now, on Cap Friendly right now, it does say emergency loan. That's what it says right now. But I think he's going to wind up being that extra guy that's out. So another one of those tweeners. But Carson Meyer last season had half season with Columbus, half season with Cleveland. Actually, he's done that the past 3 seasons where he's shuffled around between Cleveland and Columbus. Now, I thought it was interesting that he wasn't in the Cleveland Monsters' recent run in the playoffs because he happened to be up in Columbus, so he was not eligible to play in the Calder Cup playoffs. And I'm just thinking in my head, how much of a difference would it have made if Carson Meyer was able to play with the Monsters? Could they have beaten the Hershey Bears? But I'm not going to think about that, because if I think about that, it's nothing but pain. That being said, I could see him being a tweener for the Ducks and the Gulls as well. So those are a couple of signings that the Ducks made. I do want to talk a little bit more about the other signings that they made. I think it's important that they did re-sign Leeson personally, because he's someone that could even get as high as a third line this year. That's because once you had Adam Henrique leave, once you had Sam Carrick leave, that left a gigantic hole in the Ducks roster. I mean, who's left on the roster as far as forwards? Troy Terry, Alex Killorn, Trevor Zegras, Ryan Strome, Frank Vetrano, and then who's next? Cutter Gauthier, he could go as high as that second line. Brock McGinn, maybe? I don't know about that. And he was injured quite a bit. That's where it comes in a lot, that the young guys are going to have to really pull through. Mason McTavish spent some time in the second line, spent some time in the third line. This is McTavish's time to move up to the second line. So I think where the Ducks go is total youth movement. See how the young guys really gel into the league, or as I always say, let the kids play. There is one other defenseman out there that hasn't officially been signed yet, and that's Jackson Lacombe. Lacombe has not quite been signed yet. He should be, I hope, soon. All right, we're going to head to the second intermission right now and talk about other trades and moves and what that means for the Ducks this coming season. Yeah, we'll get to that on the other side. Welcome back to Locked On Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Once again, locked in with Jason JD Hernandez. Let's talk about trades. And actually, there's one particular trade that I want to talk a little bit more about than the other. And we're going to start with Brian Dumoulin. Brian Dumoulin, who came over from the Seattle Kraken in exchange for a 4th-round pick in 2026. The Ducks have all those picks. They may as well use them. And that takes off $3.15 million from Seattle salary cap. And Brian Dumoulin, just a solid player for the Seattle Kraken last season. He was a guy that contributed. He was a guy that helped out Seattle a little bit later on in the season. Before Seattle, he spent the majority of his time with the Pittsburgh Penguins, where he was a lot better in those seasons. He also won a couple of championships in Pittsburgh back when he was a young warthog, all the way back in 2016 and 2017. That seems like so long ago, but he was part of those very important and cup-winning Pens teams. And he was solid with those teams, but he was still young. Now, Brian Dumoulin is entering his mid-30s. He's 32 right now. He's going to turn 33 in September. So he is entering the latter part of his career. He had one more year left on his contract at $3.15 million. So the Ducks give up a fourth for 1 year of Dumo. This is fine. It rounds out the defense and it makes the defense a little bit more, I guess, solid this season. Do I want to go with that? I'm going to be interested to see who he pairs up with. It evens up the young guys and the not so young guys, because now you have Fowler, Gudis, and Dumoulin in their 30s. You have Minchikov, Zellweger, as of right now, Vakanainen, and maybe Lacombe, all in their mid to lower 20s. The two young guys, Minty and Zells, they're both 20 years old right now. Let's see who they pair up with. Then there was another trade that took place, kind of a curious trade here, and the Ducks did pick up Robbie Fabry from the Detroit Red Wings in exchange for Gage Alexander. Well, I guess that didn't work out, did it? I was high on Gage last season and even 2 years ago when I saw him in rookie camp and when I saw him during the training camp. And Gage Alexander is a big-bodied goaltender, big frame. It just never quite worked out for him in San Diego. He actually struggled quite a bit in San Diego this past season. So, or not saying, but in Tulsa, he struggled mightily. Only an .887 save percentage in Tulsa in the ECHL. So I think this is just a case where a change of scenery might wind up helping him. But, good luck to Gage Alexander on his new surroundings with Detroit. He could be good enough to be back up for the Grand Rapids Griffins. So Grand Rapids, that's your backup goalie, more than likely. As far as Robbie Fabry is concerned, I'm okay with this because the Ducks also got a fourth-round pick or a conditional fourth-round pick, which was originally Boston's pick, in 2025. So here's the conditions. Anaheim will receive the earlier of Detroit's own 2025 fourth-round pick or Boston's 2025 fourth-round pick, whichever one is earlier. So not a bad condition. As far as Fabry is concerned, he has spent the last 5 years with the Detroit Red Wings. He also won a cup. He won a cup with the St. Louis Blues back in 2019. If that seems like a long time ago, it was a long time ago. So Fabry was part of that team. He had a couple of really solid-ish seasons in Detroit. He was injured a bit, not this past season, but the year before that, 22-23. He was out for most of the season. But last year, 32 points in 68 games, turned it back around. Year before that, 16 points in 28 games. Year before that, 30 points in 56 games. He contributes whenever he can. He does. The question is, can he remain healthy? That's probably the $64,000 question. Can he remain healthy? I would consider that a fairly decent-sized question mark. If he remains healthy, then I could see that trade being worth it. Now, right now, he's making about $4 million a season. He's got one more year left on his contract. He's only 28 years old. By the time the season starts, he will still be 28, and then around January, he turns 29. I wouldn't say he's on the downside of his career, but injuries have cost him quite a bit. So 1 year at $4 million, that does two things. That puts the Ducks over the cap floor, thank God, and it gives them an extra pick. So, hey, I guess good news, Ducks fans. They're not below the cap floor anymore. They've done just enough to get above it. So technically, they don't need to sign anyone else as of right now. But it still looks bad when you haven't made any massive signings. Because right now, the Ducks still have about 21 million in cap space. The only team that has more cap space right now is the Calgary Flames, and Detroit is right there. Detroit didn't need to get rid of Fabry, but they did, and that's the way it goes sometimes. As far as free agents, there's not a whole left as far as free agents that are left. I mean, who's even left according to Cap Friendly as of this recording? The Ducks are not going to get John Klingberg back. They're just not. They're probably not going to go after Kevin LeBanc. Probably not going to go after him. I mean, they're not going to go after half of these guys that are on here. Joe Pavelski is going to retire. Why is he even on here? Tanner Pearson, he's been kind of moving around a bit since leaving Los Angeles and Vancouver. But aside from that, there's not much faith in some of these signings. I guess you could go after Oliver Shillington, who played in Calgary. He made $2.5 million last season, but I wouldn't consider that a splashy signing. Ooh, Alex Barabanov. Yeah, you see what I mean? The list of names that are left are not really names that are going to turn the needle right now. Do the Ducks need to make another signing just to round it out? Possibly. Could they still go after someone via trade? They still could. They still could go after Marty Necas. They still could go after Mitch Marner. As far-fetched as that sounds, they still could get him. They still have some pieces. They have draft picks. They can get either one of those guys, and it could make somewhat of a difference in Anaheim. So that is still something to consider. Do I anticipate that happening? If I were to give a percentage, I would say it's a less than 50% chance that they pull off some kind of trade, but you cannot completely take that out of the table. You never know. So that's my thoughts on that. But I'm just going to say it again. And I know y'all hate to hear this. I hate to say it again, but, try to have patience for at least one more season. After this season, the pressure is really going to be on Pat Verbeek to make some massive moves. But another thing has to happen. The youth movement has to be accelerated. The young guys really got to get going this season. Most of them. Not all of them, but if some of them, or at least most of them, can have a better season, and if some of them can really pan out and become stars in this league, then the Ducks could really begin to push forward on this next stage of the rebuild. So there is hope. I remain hopeful. I remain optimistic. I have to. All right, that's going to do it for this podcast. Once again, thank you all so much for listening, and thanks for watching. Don't forget, this podcast is free and available across all platforms, including Stitcher, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast. We're ad-free on Amazon. We're on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button if you have not already. Just right there. Just subscribe if you haven't already. You could follow me on Twitter at SnippyJD or Twitter X. The show's Twitter X is at LO_Ducks. You could drop me an email at lockedonanaheimducks@gmail.com. I may try to do one more mailbag over the summer, just for the fun of it. In the meantime, thank you all so much for listening and watching, and thanks for your continued support. It is so greatly appreciated. For Locked On Anaheim Ducks, I'm Jason JD Hernandez, saying have a great rest of the day. Please remember to be safe out there, be kind to one another, and Ducks fly together. My dog over here is rolling around. Yeah, be a dog.